Hello, my name is Jesse Goodyear, and my research surrounds adapting the design and management of coastal infrastructure to mitigate the impacts of climate change, a review of current practice in Australia. So for the introduction, I'd like to quote a great Australian environmentalist and author, Tim Flannery, who once said, "We are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it." I think these are very powerful words and something that we can all be a part of when we agree saying we are feeling the impacts of climate change. And we are right now on that cusp where if we don't do something soon, we can't reverse or adapt to the situations that climate change will put us through. The New York Times image behind this slide emphasizes it significantly. So this is titled "Global Warming Has Begun, Expert Tells Senate." This was released Friday, June 24th, 1988. This very much emphasizes what Flannery said in terms, we are the first generation to feel it. So in 1988, we were feeling it. Realistically, that wasn't too long ago. And now we are the last generation that can do something about it. So key areas of concern when looking at this study and undertaking it was very generalized, and unfortunately, this is something that we need to be aware of no matter how general it is. So increasing temperatures can damage road surfaces. More frequent and severe bushfires can disrupt transportation networks. Droughts and changes in rainfall patterns can reduce the amount of water available for agriculture. High temperatures reducing the efficiency of power plants, and so forth. There are a whole multitude of aspects that are key areas of concern, and the list could go on. But for the sake of this research, we're going to leave it at just this. The objective of the paper and the research was to find the potential impacts of climate change on Australian infrastructure. Fortunately and unfortunately, Australian infrastructure has in the past decade seen and felt the impacts of climate change already. So we already have data referring to what climate change can do to our current infrastructure and infrastructure planning. And fortunately, we can now look at that data and assess what we can change and do better. Areas of concern are transportation, water supply, and energy infrastructure. And the objective is to assess the impact of climate change on the structural integrity of roads, bridges, and other transportation infrastructure. And ultimately, as well, the need for policy and infrastructure planning is very severe too. This is an economical, social, and very much political issue that we will face in terms of infrastructure planning and climate change. So the importance of researching climate change impacts on Australian infrastructure. So properly monitoring the durability of infrastructure designs is very important. Innovating new methods and materials to make infrastructure more resilient, as mentioned before, we have experienced this for the past decade or so. So we are already innovating, which is a great thing. Accurately implementing new climate policies. Australians are some of the most hard hit in the world in terms of climate change. And most individuals in Australia feel like they have experienced climate change on an individual level. So now we are a country that is starting to be aware and awaken from all this climate change discussion to start acting on it too. The image on the right is by Dr. Benji Marks, a professor of geomechanics at Sydney University. He created this map which shows Australia's east coast. The east coast of Australia is one of the most heavily populated areas in the country. That is purely due to majority of the population, 90% or plus, are living on the coastline of Australia. As many know, the middle of the country is very much arid, drought, and desert area. The yellow and red indicates areas that are potential landslide / coastal erosion areas. And for a country where majority of the population lives on this coastline, it really indicates how dramatic and severe it can be with this much yellow and red in this area. With the country as well, we do have the Great Dividing Range that separates the east coast area to the outback middle desert area. This mountain range divides that luscious green rainforest areas that you would see in the country compared to that desert area that you would also see in the same country. So analyzing climate change impacts on Australia, I did have to look at temperature, precipitation patterns, and so forth. Once again, higher temperatures can lead to increased energy demand. Adelaide, city in the state of South Australia, was known as one of the worst cities in the country due to power supply and demand, and the grid consistently going off during high temperature times as well. The image on the left indicates what the Australian schools are coming to. So this is one of the students. Yes, we wear uniforms like this in Australia. This person is showing what the future holds for the country, where we have to attach fans with water spurting out of it just to reduce the impacts of the severe heat and heat stroke that many people may feel. Heat waves also can damage rail lines and roads, causing disruption to transport. Higher temperature can cause material expansion, which ultimately puts faults in the structural integrity of buildings and such forth. So not only does this just impact roads and electrical grids and so forth, it is impacting high rises and even just the average household. And once again, sea level rise, extreme weather events. These images are not from movies anymore. This is real life. Hailstones the size of golf balls, baseballs, even falling from the sky. Not only is this going to hurt you if it hits you in the head, but it's going to do severe damage to power grids as well as individual cars, glass panels. It even breaks bricks in half at times, depending on the force it's coming down at it. So these surges can also cause severe coastal destruction to infrastructure. These extreme weather events are causing severe issues, and this is something that we need to account for. So methods and data. So I did utilize Google Earth as remote sensing techniques. And then I also use the IPCC to project the future of impacts of climate change too. And then also interviews with experts in the field as well. One area that I did study as an example is to the right. It is called The Wall. We're not very creative, but it will do. It is located in Cronulla, New South Wales, Australia, about 20 minutes actually from where I live and a frequent spot that I go to. This wall was constructed in 1985 and labeled indestructible. If there's one thing we got to be aware about with climate change and infrastructure is to never label anything indestructible, because climate change will show you that it is not. This purpose was a seawall. The coastal erosion was severe, as you can see in the top left image. So they built this wall to prevent this from occurring and going up to the parking lots and the housing that is also behind those parking lots. So with this, they built this wall. Where that surfer is walking on the concrete area there, that used to be all under sand. So that just goes to show how severe coastal erosion is occurring, and that no, it is not going to be indestructible too. So other study locations, you had the wall with coastal erosion, rising sea levels, Sea Cliff Bridge, which is the top right image. This bridge is now a very scenic spot and very tourist hot destination spot as well. This roadway used to go along the mountain line, not actually on a bridge, it would just follow the mountainscape. You can kind of see it a bit up there. That could no longer last. There was landslides and coastal erosion occurring where authorities no longer deemed it safe to travel on, and this is now the new method of traveling. So although it goes to show that although that coastal erosion and landslides and stuff from climate change is occurring and can be very damaging, you can also create something from it. Colliery Beach, coastal erosion, that is the bottom right image. That just goes to show how severe coastal erosion can be. Market housing properties in terms of coastal areas are very expensive in Sydney and Australia in general. However, they are getting cheaper, and many people aren't basically saying it's climate change, but ultimately that is the thing, it's coastal erosion from climate change. And then the Royal National Park, which is the middle image, this area was actually very much heavily impacted by the 2019-2020 bushfires. My house is very close to this area. I actually evacuated with my family during this period, and my dad and my friend's dad actually stayed by with the garden hoses to protect the houses. And I'm thankful that I'm able to say that I can have a joke and a laugh about that, but that could have been very different very easily, that situation. So the study outcome, once again, very obvious aspects. So I did find that rising sea levels, increased storm surges, and erosion will cause significant damage to these critical infrastructure systems. There's the recommendation of taking a proactive approach to climate change adaptation, including implementing protective measures like seawalls and raising infrastructure above predicted sea level rise. Ultimately, in conclusion, the paper that I have written highlights the urgent need for action to protect Australia's coastal infrastructure in the face of growing threats posed by climate change. And this includes ongoing monitoring of evaluation of coastal infrastructure. And this is ultimately going to ensure that it is safe to keep using, or if it's not, we need to put something more resilient in place. The image on the right is from NASA, taken during those bushfires of 2019, 2020. And that smoke is not cloud, it's smoke, and it actually traveled around the entire southern hemisphere and came back to Australia only a few days later. That is how intense and thick that smoke was from those fires. So it just goes to show how severe and damaging it can be. The study outcome, resilience in coastal infrastructure. So development in new infrastructure designs consider the impacts of climate change and the use of more resilient materials. The image on the right is what a bunch of scientists in Australia have done is create fake artificial coral-like substance that they can attach to a wall, and ultimately it allows the ecosystem to attach itself to this wall. And the ecosystem being able to do that strengthens that wall as well in terms of waves smashing into it and such. So that is a very renewable and innovative idea. And once again, because Australian infrastructure has been prone to this kind of climate change things so often, that we're able to assess and look at this and see what we can do. And this is a great outcome of something we can do. Strengthening coastal infrastructure such as seawalls to prevent coastal erosion, investigating better stormwater management systems to prevent climate change vulnerable infrastructure, and promoting public awareness and education campaigns. So like I said, as many Australians have witnessed it already, and on that individual level, and that is unfortunately a way that we had to find out that we need to do something, we need to act fast. And as unfortunate as it is, it's going to be the fortunate thing in the future for us too. So if there are any questions, I'd love to take them via the email or during class. But overall, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.